Hey guys, 3 CIOs tell the truth about what it takes and what it will take to be ahead of the curve for your industry and business. Do you think you know what it takes? I was blown away. I hope you enjoy this episode of Association Chat. Welcome to this Association Chat, your weekly online discussion for the association community where we warm ourselves by the virtual fire with the topics of the day, welcoming thought leaders and trailblazers alike to join up in this online home for the community. I'm the producer and host of Association Chat, KiKi L'Italien, CEO of Amplified Growth Digital Marketing, and for today's show, we're taking a look at the role of the Chief Information Officer, or CIO, and challenging more traditional views of this position that has transformed from the days of doing everything from issuing beepers to critical personnel to today when some of our guests are juggling discussions about big data, AI, and cybersecurity on a daily basis. So, if you think you know what it takes for your CIO to make the cut, well, you just might want to listen to our three guests today. And today we have Prabhash Shrestha. Did I get that right, Prabhash?
Perfect.
Awesome, awesome. He is the VP of Information Technology for the American Gastroenterological Association, which might be even harder to say than your last name. And then Lurie, he is the VP of Operations and Chief Information Officer for EDUCAUSE. And then we have David DeLorenzo, CIO and Technology Management for DelCor Technology Solutions. Thank you and welcome to all of you for joining us today. Today's special guests, are you ready to get started?
Do it.
We are.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. And for all of you who are tuning in live and watching, I just want to let you know if you're watching on Facebook Live, there is a delay, so I won't be able to get to those questions or those comments until later. But we are going to be pulling in your questions from Crowdcast. So that's one of the benefits of participating live. So definitely make use of that. All right. So the first question that I have for you today, it wasn't all that long ago that CIO was understood to mean Chief Information Officer. And that meant that you were responsible for the security and fortitude of data management and anything else that fell under technology, and I'm sure each one of you have experienced the challenges that sort of responsibility holds. And so I wanted to start today with Prabhash. And I wanted to ask you, how have you helped your employers and your organizations that you've worked with to better understand your role, and how do you identify the boundaries of your responsibilities? Because it's certainly a lot. And I remember from way back when watching people who were called CIO doing everything from, it just ran the gamut.
Yeah, great question to start with. I think, the CIO role over time has evolved, right? As you mentioned, in the past, as the technology had, the focus was more on the infrastructure. I kind of say offense versus defense. Defense being, your internal operations, your security stuff, making sure your AMS, your CMS, your LMS, all of them work, and kind of making sure that they're well integrated with other systems. We're looking at the data on the 360 view of customer and so on and so forth. And that's how I believe, things were, at least in my role, predominantly, and those are the kinds of things that I had done in the past. But over time, like let's say last 5 to 7 years or so, and probably Dilo and Pat would agree with me that we are now looking at things in a completely different lens, right? We are looking at things from the business perspective. I find myself, and I'm encouraged at my role here at AGA, to really, understand the market, really get out there, because our members are GI folks, GI doctors. I'm really encouraged to go out to the hospital settings to talk to these GI folks, try to understand their day-to-day business, their pain points, and really focus on the offense side, which is what I mentioned, rather than the defense side. The defense side does not go away, in my point of view. From the responsibility standpoint of view, we still have to manage all of the work that needs to get done within an association from the technology standpoint of view. You are still the person who is ultimately responsible for everything that happens. But when you talk about the boundaries that you want to do, you touched a little bit on, I think things are evolving. More and more, in my role at least, I feel that strategy has become a major piece of what I do. And this is something that interests me as well. I'm a big, when I think about my association responsibility, I definitely spend quite a lot of time on, product and service portfolio. Mm-hmm. I definitely spend a lot of time understanding who's using our product, how often, where, meaning that, I'm always looking for that growth angle from whether it's the product or service standpoint of view, enhancing what we have, or creating new products, or creating new partners to bring the product online, or actually looking at the market aspect, right? I mean, do we actually grow into international market? How easy, how feasible it is for us to do so? What kind of buy-in do I have from the VP team that I have, or even the board? So in that sense, from the responsibility and the boundary standpoint of view, things have evolved quite a lot. That's quickly, in short, what I have to say about the boundaries and how things have evolved.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think it's such a challenge, because just in what you were talking about right there, now you're answering my question about establishing boundaries, but about half of what you said brought up one topic, one thing. You're talking about international growth. And for some places, that's someone's entire job, their entire focus. And so what you're looking at, some of these pieces, they're huge, actually. They're how is this industry, how are we going to grow? How is the industry going to grow? And those are big questions. And so I guess, I remember working for an association many years ago where a man who was working in the mailroom, he had once been in that CIO role, but it was back in the days of rooms and rooms full of big computers, right? And he only knew how to operate these and manage these big computers. And once technology progressed, he didn't really progress with it. And, maybe he wanted to be in the mailroom by that point, and he was like ready for the change. But I remember thinking about it and thinking, wow, you have to stay on top of how technology progresses. So as CIO, you're looking at expanding into international markets. If I'm listening to what you just said, you're talking about, growing in all of these different areas. And yet you have to stay on top, managing portfolios of your products. And yet you have to stay on top of the technology that is coming into the industry or into the world, into society, and how it's developing. Okay, so that's my pushback to you guys. And my question, I want to actually, can I bring, David, maybe if you could step in at this point and say, how do you then choose to identify, what you pay the most attention to? Because you've got to prioritize. You've got to divide up your time, right?
Yeah, absolutely do. I mean, I think, playing off of what Prabhash is talking about in the evolution, yeah, we used to be in the mode of all of the content, all the assets, all of the learning, what the vital pieces of what the association is. We were in charge of storing and securing that, not necessarily being part of the business decisions of how to grow and build that. I think where that's evolved is the CIO, the modern CIO, this is CIO we're talking about for this session. It's, the people who are successful are the ones who are grabbing that business side, the true management side. You have to be able to, you're not doing those things like you said. We're not distributing phones and laptops anymore. We're not plugging in servers in the server room ever. If you're the CIO, you are working with the senior management team. You are establishing prioritization processes, because you think about how much of control technology and the digital infrastructure is to enable everything that the organization does. So you're in that position where you have insight and visibility into almost everything operational that needs to happen. So who better than the CIO to understand every piece of the business and to go down that path and help the organization prioritize? Because I would step out there and say there's probably no one else who knows every interdependency the organization has as far as products and services where technology lies. So part of the role and where I go in, I come in from a different place as a consultant, coming in doing interim CIO roles and turnarounds. That's the first thing I see. There is backlogs of years. There is no prioritization. Executive teams are not in unison and speaking the same language around what that's one of the first things I work to establish is how are we getting this under control? How are we setting a prioritization process? Who owns it? How are we communicating that out? And that's, 10 years ago, CIOs never had that seat at the table to even have that conversation. Now we're leading it, driving it, and owning it. And I think that's a pretty big change because we are in the position to really help the organization deliver products, deliver services, grow the business, grow the membership, and all these projects have a digital touch. There is almost nothing that you do, especially international growth. Everything we're doing, we're not sending member people out across the world to try to grow. We're doing it digital. We're offering digital solutions. We're offering whether it's publications, magazines, learning, and that has to all come through a process of how that digital infrastructure is set up, and that has to come through prioritization from budget, from people, from resources. And it's really, you asked, how do we get out of it? One of your questions was, how do we elevate up there and get out of things we used to do? And it's really, you've got to build the right team. You've got to be looking at a digital mindset for your organization where they're thinking that way. And you've got to become, a huge advocate for that. You've got an ambassador, a promoter. I mean, Dad and I have done sessions where we try to teach you all the roles of what you are as a CIO now. We went through Digital Now last week, and just something that stuck with me because you think about it. Think about Facebook. Think about Amazon. Who's the CIO for those companies? It's Bezos and Zuckerberg. They're leading the entire world and as world-leading organizations as the CEO and CIO. So that's a good model to think about and how much you drive transformation in business growth.
So I love that, and I love the fact that you're giving us solid examples of people who it is a totally different role than what it used to be, and it is continuing to evolve. The fact that it captures so many different aspects of an organization is kind of amazing, and it's a lot to take on. And so my question, Thad, I want to bring you on because I haven't heard you yet. When you are working with other leaders, when you're working, with other members of the C-suite, leadership in your board, and you're running into people who they're not prioritizing the same way that you would, right? And you're looking at technology and the business directions that you need to move into. How do you best navigate that? I mean, how do you have those conversations and sort of lead them in the direction they need to be led?
Well, with any challenging conversation, that can be difficult. And I think the CIO role, as David and Prabhash have noted, it's been changing and it's long been misunderstood in that, we started off as a trains on time sort of role. And then we moved towards more of a partner and a system integrator role and bringing things together within the organization. And now we're in much more of an innovation outward facing sort of space. So when you're talking to folks about priorities, one of the things that I think we all have said it at one point or another is make sure that you're speaking business, not technology. And it's about, well, here's the system and here are the features of the system. It's much more about, this is how we can grow our membership. This is how we can expand internationally. This is how we can move our business forward. With respect to specific prioritization, I think that's a challenge in every organization. And David and Prabhash, I'm guessing that you guys have faced similar challenges. It's not necessarily that there's a technology project that needs to be done and there's also a different project that needs to be done. You have to pick one or the other. I think it's more of an overarching umbrella sort of view and understanding, like David said, how you're moving to a more digitally based culture and how you're looking at the organization and where you want to be. If you're looking at your strategic plan for the next 3 years or 5 years, what is the end state that you're trying to get to? and what are the systems and processes and people that you need to get there, and then work backwards from there and say, okay, how are we going to do these things and how are we going to line them up? I do feel that operations and technology try to bring prioritization to the table, because we're generally working on a lot of different things. As David said, we have our fingers in so many different pies that we see very broadly many things that are going on within the organization. Whereas some business units, they tend to be more focused because that's what they're supposed to do. Our job in technology is to understand everything that's going on. And so we can see some of the puzzle pieces and the conflicts that come from having all those different pieces. And also, we usually have thoughts on how we can move it forward. So I think one of the things that we are developing in this next iteration of CIOs is the ability to have those conversations in a business sense. So everybody's speaking the same language. We're all either agreeing or disagreeing in the same way, as opposed to trying to bring something with a very technological focus to the table of non-technology folks, which I think we did in the past. We're getting better. I think we still do it occasionally, but that's a conversation that organizations need to have up front if they're going to be successful, is a shared understanding of those priorities and how you're going to move things forward.
So can I, okay, no, please go.
If I may, I mean, I think I love what Thad had to say. One of the things, I've been here at AGA for the last 2.5 years. And this was a newly created position as a CIO. And one of the things that helped me was talking about the maturity, which is what, in a sense, Thad was talking about as well. So there's IT maturity. DelCor has a great model that I always tend to follow that as well. But again, from the organization standpoint of view, they also have to have that appetite and understanding of if they are ready for it. If, technology people could be good people, kind of could be disruptors, or, we're thinking differently from the business standpoint of view. If there is a, resistant culture, and if they are not ready for something like this, that could be an extremely difficult path. And that education, I think, to Thad's point, is extremely important. Early enough, I was able to talk about this organizational maturity and how we can actually collectively go through a process. I'm a very process-heavy guy, and it's very helpful that way.
Yeah.
And that was a very good exercise that we all went through. Just one more thing to add to that is, out of that exercise, we actually created an 18-team IT governance team, technology governance team. And again, to Matt's point, again, one more time, when we talk about technology here, we really, truly don't talk about technologies, as in the software and what have you, but as part of a business solution. And that's another discussion as well. So I just wanted to add that.
Can I add something to you guys? I love what you just said, and I would pile on that a little bit. Coming into roles where I'm coming into organizations to help out as a consultant-based CIO, it is amazing to me in the first 30 to 45 days that I'm engaged with a new client, how little I'm talking about technology. I'm almost always talking about culture, changing the culture, evaluating and assessing the culture and moving them forward, about things like governance and structure and prioritization, about change management and what is our path forward. So it's an emerging role in the CIO that you really have to be innovator and culture changer, because all these things we want to innovate around, if the culture is not there and it's not being driven from the top down, it is nearly impossible to get change to happen. So it's been a very interesting observation for me over the last year.
All right, you go, Thad.
Yeah, I'd love to follow up on that. It's a point that when I was thinking about the things that I wanted to talk about under the header of CIO 3.0, I'm stealing something very directly from one of my board members. Our board members are all CIOs at major universities. And one of them said, the CIO role right now is about 4 things. It's about process, people, data, and tools. And you'll notice that none of those things are technology.
Right.
So if you think about process, people, data, and tools, it all makes sense. Process, like Prabhash said, very operations oriented. People, talent within IT and elsewhere. What skills do people need to have to be successful in this age? What are the millennials bringing in that we didn't have before? Data, I think that speaks for itself. And tools. Tools is basically, I think, where you put the software and the enterprise platforms and the other pieces. But if you notice that what used to be the entire job, keeping the trains on time and the lights on, is now a small segment of really what we're expected to do and what we want to do. And
yeah, I want to say that I've witnessed this happening. I've witnessed how these conversations, the CIO isn't just talking about the technology issues, and in fact, there's more and more of it being focused on, basic management and culture and things that you wouldn't normally associate with the CIO. And yet now, here you are. And so what about somebody who is out there and they're looking for their next CIO to come on board, or maybe it's a CIO, and they're trying to figure out what they need to get stronger in order to be more marketable themselves. I mean, what are some areas that you yourselves are looking at strengthening yourselves, or you think are critical for people who are on that CIO path to pursue?
I can take go ahead and add that.
Governance and communication, and an understanding of general business strategy. I've encouraged a number of CIO types or actual CIOs to go and get their CAE. I think it's important that we do that as an industry association IT. I think it shows, if you look at the number of CAEs within our ranks now, and I'm pretty sure all three of us carry it, it just shows that we really do have a broad understanding of association principles and how things work. And so much of that comes from the fact, what we were talking about before, which is that we touch so many things. So, there's a membership segment. Well, we did an AMS implementation, so we understand membership inside and out. We understand finance because we deal with that piece. We understand teaching and learning. We understand professional development. We understand data. All of those are the things that, an executive director needs to have a decent understanding of. So as people are coming up in the ranks, it's a lot less now about, we'll make sure that you go and code in Java. That your CIO doesn't write code. Your CIO directs the orchestra. I mean, we're the ones that all the pieces, and we make them work together. So understanding those pieces, I think, is a critical.
And I would add to that is, go ahead, Prabhash.
No, please go ahead.
I would add to that is you've got to be a strong advocate for that role of the CIO too. It is in educating your CEOs, your executive team, and your staff on what, not necessarily what you are, but also what you're not, going back to some of those roles. You're in place to really be thinking ahead, where I see a lot of people trying to come up through the ranks, and they can't get out of thinking about today and yesterday and still thinking those little problems, and really thinking down the road and thinking about the future and planning for the innovation for the organization. And they haven't set up that structure within their organizations that allow them to do that. And that's back to that, having a good team, or having the right culture, having that setup where you're not constantly pulled down into those weeds of, fixing a server or doing these things that the old CIOs used to do. So it is critical. I mean, and the other thing is, Chad alluded to, and I'll repeat it again, around communication. And I'll just repeat what he said. It really is, because him and I have talked about this many times with people. How you talk is so important when you're speaking to your team and the organization. It's got to be business speak. It's got to be, association speak. It can't be techies or no one understands you but your team. You've got to put yourself, and you've got to put yourself where everybody else is, and have that empathy and understanding for their plight and their day-to-day job. We've come so much from that command and control department of no, and it's that you don't understand me. If you come at the communications, I do understand your problem, and you can explain it back to them and drop that into how you're prioritizing and innovating and letting them know that we do get you and your solution is going to, that brings you up so much out of that technology realm, and you're thought of as a thought leader, business leader, not a technology leader.
Right. And I mean, but it's important though. People, they need somebody who understands enough about the technology itself in order to come in and lead them in that way too. And so I guess I don't, I'm not trying to make it seem like it's the hardest thing, but it just seems like you're being asked, you're not even being asked to be a generalist. You're actually being asked to be an expert in how to manage technology, but also understand all of these other aspects. And so, Prabhash, please.
So, in my lens, everything that Thad said as well as Dilo said, in my mind, however, I think the most important skills away from communication, I think, is the business acumen. Able to understand the market. There are tons of things around design thinking these days. Being able to connect with not only your members, but I always, when I think about my association, not only here in my previous engagement as well, I always thought about the ecosystem beyond members, right? And I think being able to look at that ecosystem and what's needed, who our competition is, being able to really truly understand the market, the pain points. There are those are the things. Somebody who can also think about the marketing strategy, somebody who can actually read the P&L, somebody who can actually think about the growth projection, financial projections, somebody who's able to really truly able to negotiate firm partnerships with players, IT players, or technology company players in the ecosystem. I think that's the new, in my lens, those are some of the things that we absolutely have to have in the new CIOs. And those are the things that I think will differentiate them from the previous sort of CIOs in the past. If you cannot think about the growth in the form of product growth as well as the market growth, I think it's going to be extremely, in today's world, whether it's association or not, it's going to be difficult. And I think that business acumen, being able to understand the market, being able to kind of really think through about the products and services and resources that we can create, maybe for the new revenue stream. Things along that line is probably, just to add to what Thad and Dilo had to say.
In fact, Prabhash, I've always admired Prabhash as that strong drive towards, the technology, the CIO, being a driver of business and being a driver of new revenue models. And I think back to Thad's point of data being one of those key things, really where a CIO can be impactful in helping lead the organization is really looking at the data across the organization of how things are changing and being able to do analysis and business analysis to help shape the organization, because not just providing new revenue opportunities, but eliminating no longer valid revenue streams that may have been there that have changed, and creating efficiency across the organization and moving to whether digital platforms and being much more data driven. That can all come out of the the CIO's realm within the C-suite and helping to change what the organization actually does and operates.
Okay, so guys, this is a breaking point because I want to say thanks to our sponsors. So I'm going to say a few quick words, but while we go over to this point, and everyone who's watching on Periscope or on Facebook Live, feel free to ask your questions as we're going along. I am trying to monitor all of them at the same time. I'm doing so on that. There's a little bit of delay on Facebook Live, so I know that that's going to throw some things off. But I think the conversation here has been absolutely amazing. And a lot of the focus that we have on Association Chat, not all of it, but a lot of it has to do on two things. And a lot of it has to do with the future, innovation, the future, and also on technology. There's a lot of conversation around it. So it's not so much on the tools, it's on the impact that it has on how we're moving forward in the future. And so I want to come back from our sponsorship message and talk a little bit about how you recognize the people who should be the CIOs, who should be pulled up into that position. What are the hallmarks, what are the trademarks of those people? I'll give you guys a chance to think about that a little bit. And I want to say, I hope that everyone is enjoying today's chat. It's sponsorship time. I'd like to say a quick word about one of our new sponsors, Association Studios. Association Studios provides videos that engage your members. Association Studios is a team of expert writers, video professionals, and social media strategists dedicated to creating engaging videos exclusively for associations. And while you're at it, why don't you check out a returning sponsor, a silver sponsor, Fontiva, and their member nation that will take you and your organization's experience with an AMS to new heights and greater connection with your members. You can find out more about these great sponsors on associationchat.com under sponsorships, or find them on Twitter at ASSN Studios and at Fontiva Inc. and tell them that we sent you. All right. Thanks to our sponsors. We really appreciate it. All right. So back to it. I want to ask you guys a little bit about that question that I left you with, which has to do with what you're looking for in somebody that should be pulled into that position. Because a lot of times in associations, you know, we're looking around us to try to figure out who's either going to replace us when we move on, or advising other people on who they should look to for that particular role. And for all of you in your unique experiences, I'd be curious to hear what you had to say. Who should fill that CIO role? What are the traits that you should look for? Should I send it to, actually, Thad, you raised your hand. I'll send it over to you first.
I raised my hand because 2 years ago, EDUCAUSE did a joint collaboration project with an organization in the UK called JISC. They're very much like the UK brother or sister organization of ours, and they work with CIOs and IT executives at universities in the UK. And the project was to determine the characteristics that will drive the next generation of CIOs. And we had 5 UK CIOs and 5 stateside CIOs, all from relatively large schools, well known. And we met a number of times on the phone and then in person to map out what these characteristics would look like and what kind of things we should look for. And what was really interesting, we have a diagram, and if anyone's interested, just contact me directly and I'm happy to share it out. The really interesting point towards the end was the conversation around the fact that this persona that we had put together was essentially what's going to drive them being a successful business executive, except for one piece, and that was the technology knowledge that's at in the center. And so, you know, being an advocate and being a trusted advisor and being an innovation driver, those are all things that could quantify any successful business executive. But with the CIO role, we felt it was necessary that you have at least some understanding of technology infrastructure and all the pieces that came before, so that you can negotiate with a vendor successfully and know when they're, you know, trying to pull the wool over your eyes, so that you understand how the pieces go together, even if you couldn't put them together yourself. And it was a really, really interesting conversation. Identifying people with those characteristics, that's a separate piece.
All right.
So at AGA, one of the things that IT department actually did work with HR on a succession planning. It was a very open process, and I have to say I'm very proud of that process that we went through. The idea was, the knowledge transfer. Idea was to make sure that there's continuity. Idea was that, AGA as a whole, at least from the technology department standpoint, is a strong department, so that there is something were to happen, we actually have a fantastic plan, no matter who the person is, including myself. So, we have a fantastic vice president of HR. She is just absolutely fantastic. And while we worked on many of these different skills and competencies, one of the things that came loud and clear to us was passion. Passion for the cause of AGA, passion for technology, that came that, believe me, and passion for business. And these are the things, those were critical, I think, for somebody to lead a technology department in association these days, right? I mean, again, I happen to be a revenue guy. I talk dollars all the time. I talk markets and new constituency and new customers all the time. But while that's important, I think making sure that we actually are providing the best customer service to our members and existing customers are extremely important. So these are the things that soft skills that we absolutely have to have in these people who actually will be next line of CIOs. And as part of that, while we actually have a program for each one of the staff potentially who could be next CIO, there's a professional development plan so that the person can go through various stages of some of these things. I hope that helps.
And I guess I would add my 2 cents. That those are everything that Prabhash said. I think one of the biggest things is critical thinking. Really being able to do that full business analysis across the board and think broadly and deeply. It's where a lot of people in tech are really thinking deep and want, but not that breadth of thought. I think this is the other biggest change. And traditionally, when CIOs were, as I said, store and secure, command and control, they were risk averse completely. And the modern CIO has to be much more risk tolerant, and the ability to try new things, to push the edge a little bit on innovation and change. And that's a big change of modern CIO.
That, it's so interesting to me that you guys are it is that passion. And I think you're constantly pushing forward. You have to, but you're constantly pushing forward to, have that, to be able to identify how to apply the data that you're responsible for and to apply it in all of these different business cases. And I think to myself, but yet you do have that core of that technology knowledge that is necessary for you to, be in that CIO role. So I'm curious as to, what are areas that you're looking at continuing to develop in? Like what are some areas that sort of have you on fire right now and you're thinking, you know what, I'm going to keep my eye on this area because I think that this is where there's a lot of growth, or this could impact my role as CIO moving into the future?
In context of the association that we are in, is that also something that you want us to consider while we answer this?
Consider that, yeah, consider that, of course, in the association that you're in specifically, but in general too, like what are you keeping your eye on?
Thad mentioned data. At AGA, that's one of the things that we are working on, and I think, again, our CEO has really blessed us to work on some of these projects. We are looking at data from, we work with about 24 different partners here at AGA, and data is all over the place. So we are in a mission right now to kind of centralize, or actually have the ownership of the data, all of the data that's distributed in various places. We actually are trying to establish AZA Secure Data Cloud, where we can bring a lot of these information under one umbrella and do a slice and dice of the information. Currently, we do about 70 pages of dashboarding. Each of these has about 3 to 4 graphics, in some cases 5 or 6, all business aspect, and that goes out to all staff. One of the things that what we want to do is really truly understand what's going on and really truly be able to proactively and reactively take steps on making sure that we actually are providing services and products and monetizing some of those. The future goal, however, is that we actually, being a medical society, we actually have something called QCDR, which is Qualified Clinical Data Registry. There's a focus there. We also are looking at the public information, public data, public registries that we have, where we will be bringing a lot of data under our cloud. And again, I think we are working quite a lot with patients and physicians and so on and so forth. It's going to be a huge amount of data that we can actually collect and be able to start analyzing on how we can actually create new product services, and also, again, one more time, a new revenue stream. And hopefully, if we can do all of this in a very good way, especially with the HIPAA compliancy and PHI and so on and so forth in place, this could become a major revenue, new set of revenue for AGA, so that we can actually use that money to do bigger, better things down the road. So we're working quite a lot on that. There are many things, as I talked about earlier, understanding the environment that we are in, the scope that we have, the pain points that physicians do have as well. That's another big thing that we have. There is a design thinking methodology that we actually use here at AGA, starting with the empathy that Dilo mentioned earlier. And we believe in creating quick little prototypes, trying to test it out, how things work. If it doesn't work, we're able to sunset them very, very quickly. Things along that we are doing, we're working towards that as well. So, data is one of the biggest focus. And bringing it back to myself personally, I think there is a huge opportunity for not only the medical society, but association as a whole. As we all hear, the buzzword is the blockchain. I think, right now, each one of the associations, we are looking at the data that we have from the staff angle. How can we do the 360 view of a particular member or a particular customer? I think in short time, in coming years, it's going to flip, and the data that we will have the customer as a center, and maybe the customer having access to that information on not only association, one association, which is, like they say in this particular case, AGA, they may belong to 5 different associations. They may have done many transactions with many different places, and maybe the blockchain technology could be used or will be used in the future to do things from their perspective. How is that meaningful to them? From a member standpoint of view, from a physician standpoint of view, even from a patient standpoint of view. I think that I see that changing, and I see that there's opportunity there for many of us, especially in the CIO, with people who are wearing CIO hats, and that could be a different discussion down the road.
All right, thank you. You know what, David DeLorenzo, I know that you have got to jump off here pretty soon, but I wanted to ask you one quick question before I let you go. And thank you so much for doing this today. What is one great podcast or resource people can go to besides Association Chat for information to stay on top of all of the stuff that's going to help them to be better CIOs or better leaders in the association space?
Well, I don't know one best resource. I'll plug the DelCor blog, where I'll always
there you go.
Good content around CIOs, around digital strategy. That's really been a focus in the last year, and it's a launching point to a lot of other resources that are out there. I think things are changing so fast. What I read on any given day is completely different.
Except for the DelCor blog, which you've got to read every time. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
But I get a lot of resources through the variety of CIO.com emails and newsletters. It really depends on, there's such, like everything else, there's become such specialization. I'm looking a lot more in cybersecurity. In cybersecurity areas, there's many associations covering cybersecurity, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. All these places have their own insights and their own organizations, and there's tons of things cropping up. So I don't know if I have any one great source, but I would say CIO.com is a good place to start in getting a lot of things branching out. Use Gartner a lot as well. That's not necessarily free. But there's ASAE, as we try to pump a lot of things through ASAE and collaborate. There's a ton of good resources, and there's a ton of change happening. So, I think one of the best resources is people. Continue the conversation, joining these, your casts are quite frequently around technology issues within associations, and bringing CIOs and other thought leaders around technology in. So, build your network within ASAE and reach out frequently. I think that's the absolute best resource you can probably have.
Thank you so much. I'm going to kick you off right now. I'll talk to you soon. All right. So, okay, guys, it's just us now. And I wanted to ask you guys the same question that I asked him. When it comes to resources, anything that's going to help you become a better leader or a better CIO, what are you looking at? What are you listening to? Where are you going for your information? And it could be podcasts. It doesn't have to be focused on technology. Prabhash.
So I used to read quite a lot in the past, the books and management consulting and books along that line. But I don't know if it's only me, but the way I consume information has completely changed now. Let's say over the last 3-4 years, I find myself quite a lot on the social media, whether it's a Twitter, somebody tweeted something, or on the LinkedIn. And I feel like I'm on a daily basis, on an average on the weekday, I'm reading anywhere from 5 to 15 articles on various things. And somehow, some way, complete the model of how I'm consuming information has changed over time. I still subscribe to Fortune and Inc. and Fast Company and a lot of these business subscription that I have, Harvard and MIT and so on and so forth. But more and more I see that, they understand the kinds of things that we're talking about. Somehow, some way, I feel like things are being pushed to me, which makes a lot of sense. And I'm consuming a lot of information from this social media, the link that gets sent by Thad or somebody else, because that's relevant to me. And when people are posting, I think they are looking at what makes the most sense and how it can help others as well. I think they are subconsciously thinking about those things, and that's been a big difference in how I consume information. Thad, what do you have to say?
All I have to say is that you took all my talking points. Between you and David, those were my answers. I think the first place that we turn, especially as senior executives, is to the network that we've developed. And I think there's actually quite a bit of overlap between what David said and what Prabhash said. I turn to my network via social media. So most of my reading also comes from, it's not that I'm going to read Harvard Business Review every 3 days or whatever. It's much more that I saw that Prabhash mentioned an article that was of value to him. And your network is an incredible filtering system. The bigger it gets, the more tendrils it has, and also the more filtering it does for you. So as Prabhash said, I know that if he posts something, he doesn't post every article he reads. He posts 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 50. And so via Twitter and LinkedIn, we have these networks of people that do what we do, and they bring us valuable and recent information. And we also contribute back. I post something probably once or twice a week that I found on CIO.com or HBR or Forbes or wherever that in turn feeds that network. The second thing is directly the people. Often I will send an email to a group of 10 or 12 folks that I know, and it's, we've encountered this problem, has anyone else dealt with this? Or we need a new vendor in this space, does anyone have something here? Or I'm having a governance challenge, have any of you successfully navigated this? And it's a little bit more specific, but with respect to how we do our jobs better, I think on a case-by-case basis, we can get some really, really good advice from the people in this community. So for folks that are watching and listening that are not part of the community yet or want to become part, I second David's recommendation in looking at ASAE and the lists and the communities that are there. Come to an event. I know some folks are saying, well, with everything that's happening in distance learning and virtual events, that in-person events are going down and the attendance is going down and they're gonna fizzle out. I think quite the opposite. I think there's connections that you can make in person that you don't make virtually, conversations that are just much better had in person. And so I would encourage folks to come to the events, whether it's the ASE annual conference or the tech conference or Digital Now or any one of the events that is held within our space, that you can build out that CIO network, which is not only going to be great for development professionally, but also, when it's time for your next job, these are the people that you reach out to and say, I think I'm ready to move on and move up. And do you know anybody that's looking or anyone that is also thinking that I might be backfilling for them? And we all help each other that way.
I love, oh yeah, go Prabhash. Yes.
I'm so sorry. I so agree with that. Yeah. The FaceTime is absolutely something so valuable. I feel like every time I lunch with you or lunch with somebody else, and I'm in there, we get to exchange so many ideas and thoughts and run the ideas by. I also host about every 3 months or so. I host a CIO breakfast roundtable with US Transport Corporation. We invite 20 to 25 CIOs on this, and I have to say, the information that we learn and exchange over the 3 hours of time, it is just so phenomenal. That FaceTime that you talked about, that, yeah, I mean, it's reading articles, sharing, links over social media, great. But that FaceTime and the interaction that you have and things that you learn and things that you exchange, it's just golden.
I think this is such an interesting area that we've gone into here, and that's talking about the importance of our networks. And I don't know that it's not necessarily maybe a surprise to everyone how important that is. But I think that the challenge that people run into is that a lot of times it's not the first thing that they think of as being a priority. And I'm curious for you two and basically anyone who's listening, what are some ways that you foster that community? You show up to the events, you are active in professional associations like the American Society of Association Executives. But like when you are reaching out to those people, Thad, and you're asking them, have you run into this problem? Are you consciously throughout the rest of like during your week, as time goes by, are you consciously looking for ways to help or to I don't know, somehow make your network stronger or feed your network so that there's this, you're building up this reciprocity or something? How do you foster your community?
That's a really interesting question. I think there's a couple of parts to it. How you think about your network and grow it deliberately, the first part. And yes, especially when I have a specific challenge. So David mentioned he's moving more into cybersecurity. He's going to go to security conferences. He's going to connect with security professionals. He's going to learn more specifically about security topics. And I think you tend to be focusing in one area more than others at most times. Right now, in the organization, we have one of our 3 pillars of our strategic plan is personalization. And so what Prabhash was talking about, tailoring and customizing our user experience so that individuals are getting more out of it. So as it happens, I go and I speak about data and personalization, and I meet people who are interested in that, and I meet data professionals, and I meet folks that are really focused on that. Sorry, my computer's trying to restart. I got to make it not do that. Okay.
Oh yeah, don't restart. This is good.
I like to think that the community building is in very many ways a virtuous cycle. In that, you know, Prabhash and I were a little bit more senior when we joined 15, 20 years ago. We were more junior. We were looking for help and mentoring and resources and professional development and education and learning about, you know, some of the basics. And then we've moved through that. We've served on the tech council. We've gone to conferences and we've done these things, and we've got, you know, some time under our belts now. And one of the things that I enjoy most about my role in the community is mentoring some of the folks that are coming up. And, you know, they'll call for help with a problem. I had someone earlier this year that called, they had a difficult staffer and they weren't sure how to deal with it. They were looking for some help. That's not an IT problem, but it was an IT staffer. And this is somebody that I know and trust, and they were able to come to me. I know folks that are looking to take the next step in their career, and they're not sure whether they want to stay on the association side or move to the consulting side. So they come in, and there's nothing more rewarding than being able to help those people and watch them flourish and succeed on the path that, you know, you worked out together. There's nothing more rewarding than being able to go to a conference and speak to the community and have people come up to you afterwards and say, this was so helpful to me. Our organization is also struggling with this, and now I have ideas I can take back and act upon. That piece of the community, I think, sort of grows itself, because as you participate more and as you give more back, you just want to do more. And in turn benefits the next people that are coming up who will take our places and so on and so forth.
Yeah. How about you, Prabhash?
I love people, and you know, one of the things that I really truly believe that if you are out there to help people, and if you do that, it's a lot easier for you when you need that people will be there for you. It's not. I'm not trying to play that psychological game, or I'm not trying to kind of you know, turn the game for myself. Yeah. But I think humanly being out there, you know, being respectful to people all the time. I think it you know, it's really is the, you know, key. I like to connect with people, not only just saying hello on the Facebook or something along that line, but if we can help each other. I think it's very rewarding when you can help, and it's very satisfying and helpful when you need help. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. I respond to almost every single email that comes to me, every single ask. You know, I absolutely pay attention to those. and I help when I can. And if I cannot, I will let them know that I cannot, but somebody else can. And I think that goes a long way.
I need to get invited to one of your CIO breakfasts or lunches, because whenever you have that event, because I love to ask you more about that. But unfortunately, everyone, we are out of time. That's all the time we have for Association Chat this week. Thank you so much, Prabhash, Thad, David, wherever you are. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights. And here, everyone, here's what is coming up for you in the upcoming weeks from Association Chat. We've got David Gamble and others talking about leadership in action, the March for Science. And that's going to be really interesting. It's more on leadership taking a stand and what some association executives did to 3 scientific organizations band together to do the March for Science in Washington, D.C. We're going to talk to Monica Kang, and she's talking about rethinking creativity. And this is how more creativity in your work could change your job and your life. We have a representative from the Help a Reporter Out and Cision, that's owned by Cision, and they are talking about the changing role of PR and PR trends that association executives should know about. And then we're talking with Peggy Hoffman about reimagining how we engage members. So there's a whole lot. And guys, there's even more. Like after that, Olivier Blanchard, the author of Social Media ROI, he's going to be talking about what most association executives get wrong about their digital strategy. It's fascinating stuff. But I hope you've all gained some new insights that will help you later on, maybe today, maybe after that, whenever it may be. And until next time, keep asking questions to learn every day. As Joseph Campbell once said, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. Have a great week, everyone. All right. Bye, guys. I hope you liked this episode of Association Chat. Please share on social and subscribe. That's the way you tell me you like me to the podcast. By all means, tell me what you think. I always love to hear what you get from these conversations and how you apply them in your own life and business. Bye, everyone.